It is probably my second most impactful book in my life, right after the Bible. And I don't say that lightly. This book has literally changed the way I think about things, the way I do things. And I have read it probably more times than I should have, over and over again. And I've gone through it with people, and I've walked through it with people. And it's a New York Times bestseller. It's probably a Deming bestseller because I buy enough copies and give them away. Nonetheless, it's a good book. It's a simple book. It's an easy read, but it has some key concepts in it that really can help change your life. The book was recommended to me by various people. I like to read, so I just assumed they were telling me about this book because they wanted me to read something that they thought was good, or just add it to my thing. I didn't realize that they probably saw that I was violating boundaries, right? But nonetheless, I digress. What happened is at this time in my life, I was very lonely. My marriage was in shambles. Our children were in their teenage years. One of them was severely mentally ill, and we had a lot of issues on our plate. And I was probably in a very lonely place trying to figure some stuff out on my own. And so at this point, I would go down to my apartment's workout room, and I would get on the elliptical. And don't get me wrong, I'm not that strong. I was probably on there 30, 45 minutes, right? So I was on the elliptical, and I'm working out on the elliptical, but I don't like to listen to music or watch TV when I'm doing that. What I like to do is buy audiobooks and read them. And so, of course, I was broke at this time, but they had told me boundaries, and this morning I got up and I was looking, and I'm like, Boundaries, the audiobook, and there was one for like $30, however, they were expensive, and I was like, well, I can't afford to run to this today. So I found one then that said $7.99, Boundaries, this book for $7.99. It had the right authors, the right titles. I was like, boom, I'm buying you, $7.99 this morning. And so I'm working out on the elliptical, and I want you to know, can I just be honest with you, I bought the wrong book, okay? I mean, it's the right book. It was just a summary of the book, right? It was a quick summary, and it was really the author, and I think he was really just giving a speech about the book, right? But he was doing this, and so I'm on this elliptical, and I'm about halfway in my cycle, and I'm just going through this thing, and this guy he's talking about this story about a Thanksgiving dinner with a mother and with the children, their adult children, and the interactions that are going on. And while he's doing that, I'm thinking to myself, well, my mom does that. Right? And then I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, I react that way. That's exactly what I do. That's what my brothers and sisters do. And I'm thinking, man, this guy's been to our Thanksgiving dinner, And I'm going on, and then he starts talking about a scripture that he ties to it, and then he starts telling about what a healthy relationship would look like versus what happened in that scenario. And at this point, I just stopped working out. Like, it was like mind blown. He tied it to Jesus in a way that I never saw, and I was like, wow. But my mind wasn't blown because he was so amazingly, wisdom or whatever, that was just so much that I couldn't handle. My mind was blown because I realized that what my mother and my relationship was or has been in my life in this area of boundaries, that I then took that and translated that into my marriage and children and life and boundaries, and that if I'm not careful, they're going to take it and do it with their families and their life and violate boundaries in the next area. And what I realized was that part of the reason I was in this lonely moment with my marriage broken up, with my children in the way that they are, and me not having any answers for the situation, was because of boundaries that I didn't understand I needed to set early on in life because no one ever modeled it for me early on. So I stepped off the treadmill that day, or the elliptical that day, and I said, man, am I really that far off, right? Am I really that? So I went out and I bought the book Boundaries, right? But I realized, what I realized is that we were emotionally and spiritually hurting one another. And because that was all we knew. We weren't doing it because out of malice or spite or that we just were emotionally, spiritually hurting one another and transferring that on generationally because that was all we knew to do. That was how we thought the world worked. That was how we thought we were supposed to live. And no amount of giving my life to Jesus, or no amount of physical things that I've earned at work or done changed any of that. I just took all of those traits with me into everywhere that I went. And so I was here standing there, and I'm like, okay, there's something more to learn here. And that began so when I say it's the most impactful book in my life outside of the Bible, I'm honest. It's a Christian book. There's Christian values in it. It's not a bad book, but it added something that I never saw in my own self that allowed me to begin to do it. It was from God in my life.